How's it going, everybody? Welcome to the Fourth and Long podcast with your host, Alec Pecano. On tonight's podcast, we will be going over my honest review of the Ohio State Penn State football game from Saturday, my game picks, upset picks, and over under and picks against the spread for week 11, and a lot more. Let's dive right in. We're going to start with my honest thoughts on the Penn State-Ohio State game. I think Ohio State played a whale of a game Saturday. Their defense stepped up at the end of the game. I know there's going to be some people that debate whether there should have been pass interference on 3rd and goal with 30 seconds left. I think the referees made the right call in not calling pass interference. That's my personal, and that's what I think. And I think they made, like I said, I think they made the right choice not calling pass interference on that play. Ohio State's offense, Will Howard did have a couple turnovers, but to me, Will Howard did play a good game. The run game, if you look at the run game last week against Penn State compared to the week before that against Nebraska, the run game had a lot more success last week against Penn State than it did against Nebraska. Only 67 yards rushing against Nebraska for Ohio State's running backs compared to 170 yards rushing last week for the Ohio State running back room. And Jeremiah Smith, I believe, had the only touchdown. Ohio State had a chance to, at various points of the game, to extend the score out and win by a bigger margin. But hi, Mia. But they didn't, and I didn't mind a lower scoring game, but I think Ohio State needs to be careful this week against Purdue. If they're not careful, they could easily lose to Purdue. Hi, PJ. Hi to everybody that just joined. I am giving my honest thoughts on the Ohio State Penn State game. If you have any questions about college football, if you have any questions on college football or the NFL, put them in the comment section down below, and I will answer your questions throughout the show. But and I see it in the comments from somebody. They said, Mia, are you referring to Ohio State and how they could have scored more touchdowns? Or are you referring to Penn State? How they missed. Now let me get to the Penn State side. They missed a lot of opportunities to run at the score on Ohio State. And I think if they score a couple more touchdowns, they probably beat Ohio State. Now, the question everybody had after the game was, does this start the hot seat talk for James Franklin? Yes, both teams could have scored more, and I would have been fine with it because I took the over for Ohio State, Penn State. But to me, I think you could say James Franklin's seat, it's not hot yet because this is their first loss of the year, but it's getting there. If they keep losing, then his seat is going to be as hot as it's ever been going into the offseason. But like Ohio State, when they win or lose, the fan base, they're going to have their doubts about, oh, can James Franklin win big games? We saw the record going into this game. and how James Franklin was 1-12 in big games compared to Ryan Day being now 3-6 in big games. And I stand to think eventually Penn State and James Franklin can win big games. But I think it might take a little time for them to win some big games. Because, I mean, Drew Aller, don't get me wrong, he's a good quarterback. But Bo Pegula should have been starting that game. Drew Aller did not look healthy at all during the game. I watched every single second of it. Drew Aller looked like he was hobbled the entire game, and he's lucky he made it through the entire game. But they did have packages for Bo Pegula. Yes, they have. Yes, I agree. Both teams have to train more. Ohio State's got Purdue this week, and I think from experience, we all know that Purdue, even though they're having a bad season, they tend to pull big upsets. Look a few years ago, the Tyler Trent game when Ohio State played at Purdue. Ohio State went into that game thinking they were going to win big, and they got blown out, and that cost them. That was their second loss that year, and that cost them the playoffs. But now, anyway, moving on to my honest review of Texas A&M and South Carolina. I think we could all see this upset coming from South Carolina against Texas A&M. Lenore Sellers played a heck of a game, and A&M couldn't really get anything going. And I think A&M still wins out somehow, because the only tough game to me they've got left on their schedule is Texas. And let's see if they can beat Texas, because then they might meet Texas again in the SEC championship game. But Lenore Sellers, like I said, he played a phenomenal game, and that was enough for put me on the spot. Which team do I think is the best? It's kind of hard to tell. I mean, I know we're 11 weeks into the season, and this is going to sound crazy for me to say. I think this is one of the years in college football where there's not really that dominant team per se. I mean, if I had to say the best team right now would probably be Oregon, with Dylan Gabriel, Tez Johnson, and Dan Lanning, since they beat Ohio State 3 weeks ago. Second best I'd probably have to say is Georgia, even though we know that Georgia they have some issues off the field with players getting in trouble with law enforcement. Not going to go into particular detail, but. And then third, I'd probably have to say it's Ohio State. I'm not going to say kind of agree. Let me finish up. Miami, I would say they're good, but the problem is they play too many close games. And one of these weeks, they're going to end up losing a close game. The last 3 games before this week, they barely beat Virginia Tech. And if that Virginia Tech receiver catches the ball in bounds, Yes, Miami does need to fix these close games. If, like I said, if Virginia Tech's wide receiver catches that ball in bounds, there's the first loss for Miami. And then if Miami doesn't get lucky and come back against Cal, there's 2 losses. And then what about the Louisville game? They could not stop Louisville's offense. And you're telling me I do my own rankings. I don't follow the AP poll rankings because those rankings to me are a joke. And you could disagree or agree with me, and that's just how I feel. How do you still have? I understand Penn State. That I understand Penn State still in the top 10, which they deserve to be because they only lost by 7 to Ohio State. But Miami being in the top 10, Miami is not a top 10 team. Top 10 teams don't consistently get lucky and get bailed out by either officiating or the other team just falling apart. And that's what happened. That's what's happened in Miami's case. Is they've gotten lucky because the ACC's bailed them out a couple times. One, the Cal game. How are you going to tell me that's not targeting? Look at how did they describe targeting. That is clearly targeting. See, at least I have people that agree with me on that subject, that Miami keeps getting lucky. Look at teams like, and then for a while there, Michigan was still ranked, and they were either barely winning or they would lose. Like after they lost to yes, they would be lower. They would be outside. Miami would be outside the top 10 if they have lost either the Cal game or the game against Virginia Tech. One of those 2 games, if they lose that, they're outside the top 10. And there's no way to convince me. I'm not going to say convince me otherwise, but there's no way to tell me that that's not what happens. Is if they lose either of those games, that they're not outside the top 10. Next thing is I'm going to talk about a little bit about, I think Sharon Moore was not the right, and I know I'm an Ohio State fan, but I don't think Sharon Moore. Exactly. They do nothing about it. The committee, the AP, the Associated Press, they love the SEC. They love the ACC. I mean, they kind of like the Big Ten. Thing is how long they kept Michigan in the rankings. But other than that, they never give any love. It took a long time for Army and Navy to get ranked. Boise State. That's why if you want to see what my rankings are, I highly recommend you follow my Twitter because that is where I post my rankings for college football. And I also post them on my community polls on YouTube. And I do my rankings a completely different way. But anyway, back to I don't think Sharon Moore was the correct guy to hire for the Michigan head coaching job. I think they should have looked. I understand they wanted to keep all of the players there and not have them transfer. But to me, that just shows me that they felt rushed after Harbaugh left because of the whole cheating scandal. And yes, that's what it is, even though the NCAA's already came out and said that It will be resolved within the next couple of months. And it sounds like Michigan might get a postseason ban. But anyway, I don't think Sharon Moore was the right guy for the job. Now we get to my upset picks against the spread, and over-under picks for this week. We start with my upsets. My first upset is I want to make YouTube like a full-time job where I can talk about sports and give you guys my knowledge of sports, whether it be NFL, college football, college basketball, and then every so often give y'all a daily vlog. Next year, there will be no college football trip, but I will be taking the podcast on the road, the channel on the road with me to a country concert next June. If y'all are ready for that, let me know in the comments. Back to my upsets. Yes, I know. So I have Washington plus 13 to upset Penn State. Now, hear me out. I understand Penn State's going to be upset after getting beat by Ohio State. But I think Penn State should be on upset alert for the second week in a row. Hey, you're fine, Mia. Thank you for the support. But I think Penn State should be on upset alert for the second week in a row for one reason. You have a good night too. Anyway, I think Penn State should be on upset alert for one reason. Washington seems to be finding their stride in the Big Ten. And I think Jedd Fisch was a great hire for Washington after they lost Kalen DeBoer to Alabama. My second upset is Duke plus 3 to upset North Carolina State. I understand that CJ Bailey, the quarterback for NC State's been playing really well, but I like Duke here. And my last upset pick, well, no, I've got 3 more. My third upset pick is Oklahoma State plus 11.5 to upset TCU. I have learned that you don't pick against Mike Gundy. And if you want to, that's at your own expense. I've done it too many times, and it hasn't worked. I'm not willing to do it again. My next upset pick is USF plus 3.5 to upset Navy. Navy has been struggling the last couple of weeks. They lost a tough game to Rice after a long delay. So I think USF can pull the upset here. Then we've got Vanderbilt plus 3.5 to upset South Carolina. Now hear me out. South Carolina riding high after the upset over Texas A&M. And they might feel like, oh, we could upset another ranked team and Vanderbilt. Can you? Yes. Do I think it happens? No. I think Vandy pulls the upset here. Somehow Vandy is a Vanderbilt is a 3.5-point underdog at home against South Carolina. I think South Carolina is going to get upset by Vanderbilt. And my last upset is Louisiana Monroe +7 to upset Texas State. And I do think this one happens too. And now, here are my picks against the spread. First one is Southern Miss +14 to cover the spread against Marshall. We picked against the spread against Marshall last week, and it barely worked. If we would have been later, it wouldn't have worked. But it did. And I feel like we're playing with house money here with Southern Miss +14. And I feel like I feel like Southern Miss could cover this. I feel like this is an easy cover spot for Southern Miss. Then we've got Virginia Tech +6.5 to cover against Clemson. Now, Clemson's going to come out angry. They got demolished by Louisville last week. And I think Clemson, you'll hear my pick for every single game in college football in a few minutes. But I think Virginia Tech covers the spread here. But I'm not going to say if they win. Next, we've got Rice +9.5 to cover against Memphis. And Rice was the team Navy was playing last week. And that game was in a delay for 5 hours and 6 minutes. So Rice is going to want to come out and play. And I think they can easily cover that 9.5 point, the spread of +9.5 against Memphis. Next one we've got is New Mexico +3 to cover against San Diego State. Now, New Mexico's been horrible this year, but I think they can cover this spread against San Diego State. And then my last cover pick is University of Alabama Birmingham +6.5 to cover against UConn. Now, with this one, I think UIB can cover here. They've covered 2 out of the last 3 times I picked them. And yes, this is all the picks for our MVPs as well, which is completely free as long as you subscribe. And then our over-under picks. Our first one is FSU versus Notre Dame. The total is 42.5 points. And unfortunately, I don't see this game going over 42.5 points. So give me under 42. Give me and all my MVPs under 42.5 points. I know Notre Dame can score, but Florida State only scored 11 points last week against North Carolina. I don't think they cover, let alone get to at least 28 to 30 points in order for this to go over the spread. The next total we've got is Navy and South Florida. And the total is 57.5. I like over. I like the over in the South Florida Navy game at 57.5 points. I think USF has found something for Bryce Archie. Unless Byron Brown plays, it's even more of a smash spot if Byron Brown plays, because then you definitely can take the over. But I'm still taking the over because I feel like both of these defenses struggle. And there's going to be, we've seen Navy put up 45, 50 points almost every single game this year, except for last week against Rice. So give me over 56 and a half. 57 and a half, correction. Next, we've got Miami of Ohio and Ball State. And the total is 49 points. And this is a game that is tonight. I like over 49 points in the Ball State Miami of Ohio game. I think Miami of Ohio is going to score a lot of points. I think Ball State might be able to score a lot of points. And they're going to need to keep up with Miami. So give me over. Then we've got Fresno State and Air Force. Total is 41. Under, give me the under of under 41 points. Air Force is going to run the ball, grind the clock out, and not let Fresno State score. And then the last one is Jacksonville State and Louisiana Tech. Total is 56 points. This is an easy over for me on the points. 56, easy. Now we get to game picks, and I changed it up a little bit this week for game picks. We did it by the day of the week. So tonight we've got two games. We've got Bowling Green and Eastern Michigan, Central Michigan, and we've got Miami, Ohio, and Ball State. So it's Maction, midweek Maction. And the first game, Bowling Green and Central Michigan, I'm going to take Bowling Green. Because Bowling Green was my sleeper in the MAC. And they have a chance to sneak up on some people and end up at the top of the MAC and be in a MAC championship game like I predicted in the preseason. So give me Bowling Green. And then Miami, Ohio, Ball State. Give me Miami, Ohio to win. And a close game that's high scoring. Tomorrow we've got two games in the MAC. Again, we've got Ohio and Kent State and Northern Illinois and Western Michigan. Give me Ohio and Northern Illinois. Give me Ohio to beat Northern Illinois in a low-scoring defensive battle. And in Western Michigan and Kent State, Ohio. Give me Ohio. NIU, Western Michigan. Give me Western Michigan. I think Western Michigan beats Northern Illinois. Thursday, we've got Appalachian State and Coastal Carolina, and Florida Atlantic and East Carolina. In the App State Coastal Carolina game, give me App State. In the Florida Atlantic East Carolina game, I'm going to take Florida Atlantic. And then we get to Friday. We've got Cal, Wake Forest. We've got Rice and Memphis. We've got Iowa and UCLA, and New Mexico and San Diego State. Going down the list, give me Cal to beat Wake Forest. Give me Memphis to beat Rice. Give me Iowa to beat UCLA. And give me San Diego State to beat New Mexico. And then you get to Saturday, and we start with the noon games. Going down the line, we've got Syracuse, Boston College. We've got West Virginia, Cincinnati, Miami, Florida, Georgia Tech, Navy, South Florida, Texas State, and Louisiana Monroe. We've got Florida, Texas, and we've got Purdue, Ohio State, and Minnesota, and Rutgers. Syracuse and Boston College. I'm going to take Boston College. I think Syracuse, they're overachieving in year one under Fran Brown. I think they lose. I think they're bowl eligible now, or they need one more win. I think they lose one of their next 3 games. And then you've got West Virginia, Cincinnati. Neil Brown needs to win out to save his job. If he does not win out, he will be gone. So give me West Virginia. Georgia Tech, Miami. Give me Miami of Florida. Give me the Canes. South Florida and Navy. Give me USF. Like I said earlier, I think there's going to be a lot of points in the South Florida Navy game. So give me USF. Louisiana Monroe and Texas State. Give me Louisiana Monroe to pull the upset. Florida, Texas. Give me Texas. I think Florida maybe keeps it close for a little bit, but they did lose their quarterback. So that tells me that they're probably going to lose this game somehow. Purdue, Ohio State. Give me Ohio State to beat Purdue. And I think Ohio State might come out this game and say, you know what? We need to impress. And they might put up 50. And we might see Jillian Sayin in the second half. And then we've got Rutgers and Minnesota. And I'm going to take, and you should take Rutgers. 1 o'clock to 8 p.m. We start with Liberty and Liberty MTSU, UConn, UAB, Southern Miss, Marshall, Georgia State, JMU, Duke, North Carolina State, Clemson, Virginia Tech, Iowa State, Kansas, and Army in North Texas. So we're going to go down the list. I'm taking UAB to beat UConn, Liberty to beat Middle Tennessee State, Southern Miss to beat Marshall, James Madison to beat Georgia State, Duke to beat North Carolina State, Clemson to beat Virginia Tech, Iowa State to beat Kansas, Army to beat North Texas. And then we've got, on the back page, we've got Georgia, Ole Miss, San Jose State, Oregon State, Michigan, Indiana, Colorado, Colorado, Texas Tech, Temple, Tulane, Kennesaw State, UTEP, South Carolina, Vanderbilt, Jacksonville State, Louisiana Tech, Arkansas State, Louisiana, Western Kentucky, New Mexico State, Mississippi State, Tennessee, Oklahoma State, TCU, UCF, Arizona State, Maryland, Oregon, Florida State, Notre Dame, Alabama, LSU, Oklahoma, Missouri, Washington, Penn State, UVA, Pitt, Nevada, versus Boise State. So we're going to go down the list. We're going to start with, I have Ole Miss beating Georgia. I have Oregon State beating San Jose State. I have Indiana beating Michigan. I have Colorado beating Texas Tech. Temple, Tulane beating Temple. Kennesaw State beating UTEP. South Carolina losing to Vanderbilt. Yeah, I have Vanderbilt beating South Carolina, Jacksonville State beating Louisiana Tech, Arkansas State beating Louisiana, Western Kentucky beating New Mexico State. Mississippi State losing. Tennessee beating Mississippi State. Oklahoma State beating Texas Christian. I have Arizona State beating UCF. Maryland losing to Oregon beating Maryland. Notre Dame beating Florida State. LSU beating Alabama. Oklahoma beating Missouri beating Oklahoma. Pitt beating UVA. Boise State beating Nevada. And then we get to the late games. We've got UNLV versus Hawaii. We've got Fresno State versus Air Force. BYU versus Utah. And Utah State and Washington State. Whew, a lot of talking here. I've got UNLV beating Hawaii. I've got Air Force beating Fresno State. I've got BYU beating Utah. Utah is a mess. And I've got Utah State. I've got Washington State beating Utah State. And if you've enjoyed this video, please remember to leave a like and comment and turn on post notifications so you don't miss the future upload. I will be back at 10 o'clock with another video. Have a wonderful rest of your Tuesday afternoon.